What's up, gamers? If you couldn't already tell, today we're going to be talking about hags, and we're going to be talking about how you can play a hag in D&D 5e. So, let's jump into it. Woo! So, I wanted to talk about hags because I think they're super fun, they're super interesting, and I think there's a lot of cool things that you can do player character-wise with them. So, the main race we're going to be talking today, of course, is the Hexblood. And we're going to be talking about how to match what your character can do to the abilities of a hag to make them seem even more hag-like. So, say for example that you wanted to play a character that's based off a night hag, or maybe the daughter or son of a night hag, or like an experiment of them, anything like that. So, funny enough, night hags are the only hags that are not fae. They are actually fiends, and they are personally one of my favorite types of hags. So, that's why we're starting with them. So, you're probably going to want to play a character that has high charisma, um, or intelligence. So I'd play charisma or intelligence based caster. Um, and I think with hags, it's cool to try and follow their stat arrays to a degree. You don't want them to be exact the same, but like, you know, playing a playing a character that's the spawn of a night hag would make more sense if you're perhaps a sorcerer or a wizard rather than a druid. But you could make a druid work too. It's whatever works best for you. But for this specifically, I would always, or not always, but I would go something like this character who is a hexblood, but they are a tiefling hexblood. So it's flavored so they're less fey and more fiendy. So even though they're a hexblood, they're still more fiendish. Personally, if you are doing this build, I would always go variant tiefling and take the winged variant, because then you get your fly speed and you can still be a hexblood, and it's kind of based and broken and my favorite. Anyway, um and like for this character's class, I actually have lunar sorcery and the undead warlock because I was trying to think of builds that could fit the hag the best, or the night hag specifically at least. So I went with lunar sorcery and then the undead warlock because I think flavor wise those two can intermingle really well, especially if you're doing like a spoopy lunar sorcerer. And that way charisma is your main spellcasting ability, just like it is for the night hag. And you also, like with the undead, I really went here because you get the form of dread, so you can make yourself look really scary, which I think works for a hag. So maybe like how hags have a form that's, their trick form, which is like a beautiful woman, and then they turn into themselves. Maybe you're the opposite. Maybe you're beautiful man or woman, and then you turn into your form of dread, which is like more hag like. And I think that could be a cool aspect, and maybe you could expand upon this and like change it as your character grows in power and becomes either more hag like or like less hag like, whatever you really want to do here. And so this is kind of what I would do. This is my charisma based hag, right? Um and I think this is good because it also, the lunar sorcerer, you can also shift your phases, and maybe your phases look different because they look like different aspects of the hag. So like maybe your full moon phase is more of like a haunting phase, that's your very spooky phase. But maybe your new moon phase is actually like, maybe just a more, I don't know how to say this without being offensive, but like a more attractive version of your character, trying to like beguile and like lure others in. And maybe talk to your DM about changing the subclass spells. I'd always talk to your DM about that if you want spells that still fit with the subclass but work with your character better than the pre-written ones. So yeah. Um and also think about like actual abilities, right? So for their spells, you might want to take Detect Magic or Magic Missile because those are spells that the hag has. Same when you get to much higher levels, you might want to take Plane Shift and or Ray of Enfeeblement or Sleep because those are spells that mimic what the hag can do. So, and maybe for like Nightmare Haunting, you might want to take Dream or something like that. So, yeah, or like Curse, you know? And the nice thing is you do get Hex as Hex Blood, so you do at least have like a little mini curse just by taking the Hex Blood race, which is cool. So, yeah. And I also wanted to talk about the is it the anus hag? I think it's Anis, but I always say anus hag, and I'm like, I don't think that's right. So if you wanted to play a Hex Blood or a witch type character, um, but you don't want to play a caster, I would personally make them more leaning off the Anis hag because these are hags that don't have very much spell casting, which and you do get a little bit of spell casting just by taking Hexblood, which is really nice. But they're more about, you know, the damage, the physical damage, and they're very not pretty looking. You want to take a look at this art here, look at them. I love them. I love the anus hag. So they have a bite attack and a claw attack. So I would think about maybe doing something that or a class that lets you have unarmored strike, so you could theme it as like your claws and your biting. So you're fighting like the hag, you know? Or and maybe if you don't want to go Hexblood, or if you're picking a race and then picking Hexblood, maybe try and get a race that has damage resistance to cold damage. Um, so yeah, and then like when you're thinking of languages, you also want to do something similar, like maybe take the same languages the hag would have, so maybe take Giant and Sylvan. So yeah, that's kind of what I would suggest for this Hagaroony right here. But I also want to talk about the classic hag, which is the green hag, right? So for this, I think just like straight Hexblood works really well, but for green hags, um, their wisdom and charisma are actually their highest casting stats. So funny enough, for this specific build, I would actually recommend playing a druid because green hags are a lot more nature associated. Not all the time, but definitely a lot of the time. But you could also do a bard hexblood. I think that would work well, especially, they have minor illusion and vicious mockery as well. So yeah, but I think if you want to go the nature route, druid works. You could also take something like primal savagery, and then you could get the claws, with that cantrip. So there's a lot of cool things you can do with hags. It's all about flavor, but really when you're trying to play a certain type of monster archetype as a PC, I would look at that monster stat block and then see how you can take things that are player abilities that mimic what's on this stat block that still are able to make you feel, powerful. So, and see with the languages, you could take Draconic and Sylvan, and also same with their skills. You could even look at their skills and be like, okay, well, the Green Hag is good at Arcana and Deception, so I want to take my proficiencies in Arcana and Deception. So we also have the Sea Hag. For this, I'd probably recommend any of the sea races, and then go Hexblood, so that way, hopefully, you can get that swim speed. And this hag doesn't have quite as many spells, so you could also probably take a martial class for this too. Maybe like Oath of the Open Sea Paladin, I think would be good. So yeah, just think about what you want to do and like look at the stat blocks. And I know this is overall kind of a simple video on how to play these kinds of characters, but I think it's really fun. So we also have our, I think you say this is your Bohir. Gosh, this hag is it's a little graphic. I used this with a party one time and she cannibalized one of their an NPC that they really liked right in front of them, like just started feasting on her corpse, which was it was a little intense. So for this, you probably definitely I would recommend a spellcaster, because this hag has a lot of interesting abilities, but maybe a spellcaster that's particularly brutal. Their charisma is the highest by far, so I would definitely recommend a charisma caster for this one. And whatever it is, make sure that a charisma caster is able to get a lot of perturbing attack spells. Um, so just to make them as creepy and as messed up as possible. I think this is probably one of the most messed up hags. Just, we'll start eating batis right in front of you. So, yeah, and they also have things, she also has Cone of Cold, Wall of Ice. So maybe like an ice themed character. There aren't that many, like, there aren't really ice themed subclasses, but if you want to make one, that would be cool. That would be very cool. So, there's also the Dusk Hag here. This is one I'd actually just recommend, like Lunar Sorcery or something dream based. Which I think would work very well for this hag. Because they literally have a reaction called Dream Eater, and then they have something else called Nightmare Touch. Yeah. I also, if you are playing a hag warlock, which I know isn't a subclass, I think it should be warlock of like the grandmother hag or something like that. I think that would be really cool. Um, then just you would probably want to flavor your abilities around the type of hag that you're doing as well. Same with everything else, but I think for warlock, if you're playing an already existing patron, like if you're Pact of the Fae, if you're Pact of the Fae, then it's gonna be almost all of these warlocks except for the Night Hag. This would be Pact of the Fiend, to be honest. Um, then I think there's interesting ways you could probably flavor your abilities to make them more hag-like, and then just talk to your DM. Maybe there's like certain spells that you want to have access to that you don't. But yeah, overall, it's basically, once again, just communication, talking with your DM, letting them know that like you want to do this, and if you want to go down the route of actually becoming a hag and turn into your DM, and like of actually turning into a hag, talk to your DM. Because you can do that as a hexblade, but then you give over control of your character to the DM as it states in their stat block. So maybe you can work with your DM to find a way to do that, where like technically they're not actually like a hag. So like you can still control them as a player character, especially when you get into higher levels, because once you're into like much higher levels, you can probably solo a hag. So it makes sense like that you'd be able to become a hag yourself. But also, that's going to probably get very dark very quickly, which I can understand why some DMs would have a problem with it, but that's why Hexblood exists. So you can be half hag and not, murder children and feast on their bones. So, like, yeah, definitely talk to your DM if you actually want to be a full hag. That's a little different. But if you want hag-like abilities, it's all about flavor and learning how to kind of like manipulate your character abilities to match certain hag abilities to make them feel more witchy. So, yeah, that's how to play a hag in D&D 5e. I hope you enjoyed this word vomit. Have an amazing day, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Oh, and I guess hit that notification bell too, maybe. Thanks. Bye. Subscribe, please. Bye.